What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses walks onto a morning talk show expecting a friendly chat, only to be blindsided by a host who seems determined to tear her down? In just 46 seconds of relentless questioning, Lorraine Kelly would ignite a firestorm that would see Kate Winslet do something she had never done before on live television: walk off. But this wasn't a diva tantrum. This was a woman pushed to her absolute limit by questions so invasive, so disrespectful, that even the studio audience turned against the host. This is the story of how Britain's so-called queen of daytime television crossed a line she could never uncross. Kate Winslet arrived at the studio that morning in good spirits. She was there to promote her latest film, a passion project she had spent years bringing to life. The actress, known for her grace under pressure and her refusal to play Hollywood's games, had done thousands of interviews. She knew how to handle tough questions. She knew how to deflect with charm, but nothing could have prepared her for what Lorraine Kelly had planned. The interview started innocently enough. Lorraine welcomed Kate with her trademark Scottish lilt, all smiles and warmth for the cameras. They talked about the weather. They talked about Kate's journey to the studio, standard morning television fare. But anyone paying close attention would have noticed something off. Lorraine's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her questions felt perfunctory, like she was rushing through the pleasantries to get to something else, something she had been saving. "So Kate, let's talk about your new film," Lorraine began, leaning forward in her chair. "You play a mother dealing with incredible loss. Very heavy material, very emotional. Tell me, how do you prepare for a role like that when you have children of your own?" Kate nodded, grateful for what seemed like a thoughtful question. "Well, I think being a mother actually gives you a deeper understanding of that kind of love, and therefore that kind of loss. You tap into those fears we all have as parents, the what-ifs. It's terrifying, but it makes the performance authentic." "Authentic," Lorraine repeated, her voice taking on an edge that made Kate's publicist, sitting off camera, straighten in her seat. "That's interesting you use that word, because there's been quite a bit of discussion about authenticity when it comes to you lately, hasn't there?" Kate's expression remained polite but confused. "I'm not sure I follow." Lorraine glanced down at her notes with a smile that could only be described as predatory. "Well, you've built your entire career on being the everywoman, haven't you? The relatable star who doesn't conform to Hollywood standards, who speaks out about body image and unrealistic beauty expectations. And yet, here you are, looking absolutely flawless at 50 years old. Some people might call that a bit hypocritical, don't you think?" The studio audience, who had been warmly receptive just moments before, went silent. Kate blinked, clearly taken aback by the sudden shift in tone. "I'm sorry, I don't think wanting to feel good about myself makes me a hypocrite," Kate said carefully, her voice steady but her discomfort visible. "I've always been honest about my journey with self-acceptance. That doesn't mean I can't take care of myself." "Oh, come on now," Lorraine said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "You can't honestly expect us to believe you look like that without a little help. Botox, fillers, maybe a little nip and tuck here and there. There's no shame in it, Kate. Why not just be honest?" Kate's jaw tightened. The cameras caught it all. The way her fingers gripped the armrest of her chair. The way she took a breath before speaking, clearly trying to maintain her composure. "Lorraine, I have been nothing but honest throughout my entire career. If you're accusing me of having cosmetic procedures, you're wrong. And frankly, I find it incredibly inappropriate that you're sitting here trying to pressure me into, confessing to something I haven't done? Is this really what we're doing?" "I'm just asking the questions that everyone at home is thinking," Lorraine said with a shrug, playing to the audience, who were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "I mean, look at you, not a wrinkle in sight. It's simply not natural for a woman your age." "A woman my age," Kate repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "Right." Lorraine pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the fact that she was losing the room. "And while we're on the subject of honesty, let's talk about your weight. You've fluctuated quite a bit over the years, haven't you? Up and down, up and down. Some might say you've been sending mixed messages to your fans, preaching body positivity while clearly struggling with your own image issues." Kate's publicist stood up off camera, making frantic cutting motions at her throat, trying to signal to the producers to end this train wreck. But Lorraine had no intention of stopping. "I have never struggled with image issues," Kate said, her voice rising now, the composure starting to crack. "I have struggled with an industry and a media culture that constantly tries to make women feel inadequate. That tears us down for not being thin enough, then tears us down for losing weight. That mocks us for aging naturally, then accuses us of having work done when we don't look haggard enough for their liking. And quite frankly, Lorraine, I expected better from you. You're a woman in this industry too. You know what it's like. Oh, please, Lorraine scoffed, on live television. Don't try to make this into some sisterhood moment. I'm simply pointing out what everyone can see. You've built a brand on being real, but the reality is you're just as manufactured as every other Hollywood actress. You're just better at hiding it. The audience gasped. Several people in the front row could be heard muttering in disapproval. One woman shook her head in disgust. Kate stared at Lorraine for a long moment, and you could see the exact second she made her decision. Her face, which had been flushed with anger, went completely calm. She reached up and unclipped her microphone with steady hands. "What are you doing?" Lorraine asked, her confidence finally faltering. "I'm leaving," Kate said simply, standing up from her chair. "I came here to talk about my work, to talk about a film that means everything to me. A film about loss and love and the resilience of the human spirit. Instead, you've spent the last several minutes trying to humiliate me on national television, questioning my integrity, making snide remarks about my appearance, suggesting that I'm lying to the people who have supported me throughout my career." "Now, Kate, let's not be dramatic," Lorraine said, trying to laugh it off. But there was panic in her eyes now. She could feel the interview slipping away from her. "I'm just having a conversation. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you're not as strong as you pretend to be." That was the final straw. Tough questions? Kate's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Tough questions are about my process as an actress, about the themes in my work, about the choices I make in my career. What you're doing isn't journalism, Lorraine. It's bullying, and I won't sit here and be a part of it. She started to walk off the set, her heels clicking against the studio floor in the dead silence that had fallen over the room. Lorraine, realizing that she was about to look like a complete fool on her own show, made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Fine, run away then," Lorraine called after her, her voice shrill now, all pretense of professionalism abandoned. "Just proves my point, doesn't it? You can dish it out, but you can't take it. All those speeches about being strong and real, and the moment someone challenges you, you fall apart." Kate stopped in her tracks. For a moment, it looked like she might keep walking. The smart move would have been to leave with her dignity intact. But Kate had had enough of being the bigger person. She turned around slowly and walked back toward Lorraine, who suddenly looked far less confident. Kate didn't sit back down. Instead, she stood at the edge of the set, looking directly at the host who had just made the biggest mistake of her career. "You want to know what's real, Lorraine?" Kate's voice was quiet now, but it carried through the entire studio. "What's real is that I've spent 30 years in an industry that chews women up and spits them out. That tells us we're only valuable if we're young and thin and perfect. I have fought against that narrative every single day. I have spoken up for women who don't see themselves represented on screen. I have refused to let my daughters grow up thinking their worth is tied to their dress size or the smoothness of their skin." Lorraine opened her mouth to interrupt, but Kate held up a hand. "I'm not finished. What's also real is that you, a woman who has been in this business for decades, just spent 15 minutes trying to tear me down for the crime of, what exactly? Looking healthy? Being confident? Refusing to apologize for existing in a body that doesn't conform to your expectations? You should be ashamed of yourself, not as a presenter, but as a woman." The audience erupted in applause. Several people stood up, giving Kate a standing ovation, right there in the middle of the interview. Lorraine's face went through several shades of red as she realized she had completely lost control of the situation. "I think you're overreacting," Lorraine tried weakly, but her voice was barely audible over the applause. "And I think you're a bully," Kate said matter-of-factly. "I think you brought me here today with the intention of making me look bad, of creating some sort of viral moment that would get people talking about your show. Well, congratulations, you got your moment, but it's not going to play out the way you think it is." She turned to the audience then, her expression softening. "Thank you all for coming today. I'm sorry you had to witness this, and I'm sorry to my fans who tuned in expecting to hear about the film. I hope you'll still go see it. It's a story about standing up for yourself, about refusing to be diminished by people who want to make you small. I think that's a message we all need right now." With that, Kate Winslet walked off the set for the second and final time, leaving Lorraine Kelly sitting alone in front of a hostile audience and cameras that were capturing every second of her humiliation. "Well," Lorraine said, trying desperately to salvage something from the wreckage, "I suppose we'll have to agree to disagree. Kate Winslet, everyone. Very, very sensitive this morning." But the audience wasn't having it. The applause that had been for Kate turned into boos directed at Lorraine. One man in the front row stood up and shouted, "That was disgraceful," before walking out himself. Others followed. The producers were in full panic mode now, trying to figure out how to cut to commercial without making things worse. Lorraine, her face now pale as she realized the magnitude of her mistake, attempted to continue. Coming up after the break, we'll be talking to... Let me just check my notes here. But her voice trailed off as more audience members got up and left. Her hands were shaking as she shuffled her papers, trying to find something, anything, to say that would make this better. There was nothing. "You know what?" Lorraine said, her Scottish accent thickening the way it always did when she was stressed. "I think we should take that break now. We'll be right back." The moment they cut to commercial, Lorraine ripped off her own microphone and stormed off the set, leaving her producers and crew to deal with the chaos she had created. The audience members who remained were buzzing with conversation, everyone talking over each other about what they had just witnessed. "I can't believe she spoke to her like that," one woman said to her friend. "Absolutely uncalled for," an older gentleman agreed, shaking his head. Kate handled it with far more grace than Lorraine deserved. Backstage, Kate was being comforted by her publicist and members of the crew, many of whom apologized profusely for what had happened. Several told her they had never seen Lorraine behave that way before, though Kate suspected that wasn't entirely true. You don't go from zero to that level of nastiness without practice. "Are you okay?" her publicist asked, squeezing Kate's hand. "I'm fine," Kate said, and surprisingly, she was. "Actually, I feel better than fine. I'm tired of smiling through things like that, tired of being polite while people take shots at me. If I'm getting older and supposedly irrelevant anyway, I might as well say what I actually think, right?" Her publicist laughed despite the stress of the situation. "Well, you certainly did that. Social media is going to explode." She wasn't wrong. Within minutes, clips of the interview were spreading across every platform. But the narrative wasn't the one Lorraine had hoped for. People weren't criticizing Kate for being oversensitive or unprofessional. They were outraged on her behalf. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of the actress and condemning of the host. Lorraine Kelly just committed career suicide on live television. One tweet read, racking up thousands of likes within the hour. "Kate Winslet is a queen for walking out. Nobody should have to sit there and be disrespected like that." Read another. "Been watching Lorraine for years, but after today, I'm done. That was absolutely vile," commented a longtime fan of the show. Even other celebrities began weighing in, praising Kate for standing up for herself and calling out the toxic culture of morning television that thinks it's acceptable to ambush guests with personal attacks disguised as questions. Back in the studio, the producers were having an emergency meeting. The second half of the show was supposed to feature a cooking segment and an interview with a reality television star. But the energy in the building was all wrong. The remaining audience members seemed distracted and upset. The crew was whispering among themselves, and Lorraine was locked in her dressing room, refusing to come out. "We need her back on set in 5 minutes," one producer said, knocking on the dressing room door. "Lorraine, come on, we have a show to finish." "I'm not going back out there." Lorraine's voice came from inside, muffled but clearly distressed. "Did you hear them? They were booing me, in my own studio. This is supposed to be my show." "It is your show," the producer said, trying to sound soothing. "Which is why we need you to go back out there and smooth this over. Maybe make a little apology, move on to the next segment." "Apologize?" Lorraine shrieked. "For what? For doing my job? For asking the questions everyone wants answers to?" The producer exchanged glances with his colleague. They both knew this was bad. Very bad. The kind of bad that gets people fired. "Nobody wanted you to attack her like that, Lorraine," he said quietly. "That wasn't interviewing. That was... I don't know what that was, but it wasn't okay." There was silence from inside the dressing room. Then, finally, the door opened. Lorraine stood there, her makeup hastily retouched, her expression hard. "Fine," she said coldly. "I'll go finish the show, but I'm not apologizing. Kate Winslet is a professional actress. If she can't handle a little heat, that's on her, not me." The producer wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that she was making a terrible mistake by doubling down on this, but there wasn't time. The commercial break was almost over. They needed her on set. Lorraine walked back out to lukewarm applause from the diminished audience. She took her seat, pasted on a smile that looked more like a grimace, and powered through the rest of the show. But everyone watching could tell her heart wasn't in it. She kept glancing at the empty chair where Kate had been sitting, as if she couldn't quite believe what had happened. During the cooking segment, she barely paid attention to the chef demonstrating how to make a simple pasta dish. Her questions were distracted, her usually sharp wit completely absent. When she was supposed to taste the final product, she took one small bite and said it was lovely, even though everyone could see she hadn't really tasted it at all. The interview with the reality star was even worse. The poor woman, who had been excited to be on the show, found herself talking to a host who was clearly somewhere else mentally. Lorraine's questions were generic, her follow-ups non-existent. At one point, she called her guest by the wrong name, something the old Lorraine would never have done. When the show finally, mercifully, ended, Lorraine didn't do her usual cheerful sign-off. She simply said, "That's all we have time for today. Join us tomorrow," and walked off, set the moment the cameras stopped rolling. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By that evening, the interview had been watched millions of times online. Think pieces were being written about the treatment of women in media, about the difference between tough interviewing and bullying, about the courage it takes to walk away from a toxic situation even when cameras are rolling. Kate Winslet didn't release a statement. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any carefully crafted press release ever could. She had shown, in real time, what it looks like to set boundaries and refuse to accept disrespect, regardless of the professional consequences. Lorraine Kelly, on the other hand, found herself in the middle of a public relations nightmare. Sponsors began distancing themselves from the show. Viewers were threatening boycotts. Other celebrities were canceling their scheduled appearances, not wanting to risk being subjected to the same treatment Kate had endured. The next morning, Lorraine's show opened not with her usual bubbly greeting, but with a prepared statement. She looked directly into the camera, her expression serious, and said the words her lawyers and publicists had crafted for her. "Yesterday, during my interview with Kate Winslet, I asked some questions that, in hindsight, were inappropriate and disrespectful. I let my desire to create an engaging interview cloud my judgment, and I crossed a line. I want to apologize to Kate, to my viewers, and to anyone who was made uncomfortable by that exchange. It doesn't represent the values of this show or the person I strive to be. It was a professional apology, hitting all the right notes, but viewers noticed what was missing. There was no real acknowledgement of what she had done wrong, no recognition of the specific harm caused by questioning Kate's integrity, mocking her appearance, and then lashing out when called on it. It felt hollow, performative, an apology designed to make the problem go away rather than to actually make amends. The controversy had exposed something that many people had suspected but few had been willing to say out loud. Morning television, with its bright lights and cheerful hosts and comfortable sofas, could be just as cruel and exploitative as any other corner of the media. The cozy setting didn't make the questions any less invasive. The friendly demeanor didn't make the judgment any less harsh. Kate Winslet had pulled back the curtain on that reality, and she had done it not by making accusations or going on a publicity tour, but simply by refusing to participate in her own degradation. By standing up, removing her microphone, and walking away, she had sent a message that resonated far beyond that particular interview or that particular show. The message was simple but powerful. You do not have to sit there and take it. You do not owe anyone your dignity. You do not have to smile and nod while someone tears you down for entertainment. You can say no. You can leave. You can demand better. In the days that followed, other actresses began sharing their own stories of uncomfortable morning show interviews, of hosts who seemed friendly before the camera started rolling, then turned sharp and critical once they were live, of questions about their bodies, their relationships, their parenting choices, all disguised as lighthearted chat. The Kate Winslet interview had opened a floodgate, and the conversation it sparked was long overdue. As for Kate herself, she remained largely silent on the matter. She attended her film premiere looking radiant and unbothered. When reporters asked about the incident, she smiled and said simply, "I think everything that needed to be said was said in that moment. I'm proud of the film, and I hope people will focus on the work rather than the drama." But in private moments, captured by paparazzi with long lenses, Kate could be seen laughing with friends, looking lighter somehow, as if by finally saying enough is enough. She had shed a weight she had been carrying for far too long, the weight of always being polite, always being accommodating, always putting everyone else's comfort before her own boundaries. The interview that was supposed to promote a film about resilience and standing up for oneself had become its own lesson in exactly those themes. Kate Winslet had walked into that studio as a respected actress. She walked out as something more, a symbol of dignity, a reminder that grace doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, a testament to the power of simply walking away when someone refuses to treat you with basic respect. And Lorraine Kelly, she continued hosting her show, but something had fundamentally changed. She was more careful now, more measured. The sharp edges that had always been part of her interviewing style were filed down, softened. Whether that was genuine growth or simply fear of another public relations disaster, only she could say. But for 46 seconds on that morning, Lorraine Kelly had revealed something about herself that no amount of apologies or image rehabilitation could completely erase. She had shown that beneath the warm Scottish charm and the daytime television friendliness was someone capable of casual cruelty. Someone who thought it was acceptable to mock and belittle a guest in the name of entertainment. Kate Winslet had shown something too. That strength isn't always about fighting back or having the perfect comeback. Sometimes strength is knowing when to simply stop participating in something that demeans you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand up and walk away. That morning television interview lasted less than 20 minutes from start to finish. But its impact would be felt for far longer in conversations about respect and boundaries, about the treatment of women in media, about what we owe each other as human beings, even when cameras are rolling and ratings are at stake. It became a defining moment for both women, though in very different ways. For Kate, it was a moment of empowerment, a line drawn in the sand. For Lorraine, it was a cautionary tale about what happens when you mistake meanness for honesty and cruelty for courage. Years from now, when people talk about Kate Winslet's career, they'll mention Titanic and The Reader and all her incredible performances. But they'll also mention the morning she walked off a talk show rather than accept being disrespected. Not because it was her most important professional moment, but because it was perhaps her most important human moment. The moment she chose herself over politeness, dignity over publicity, truth over pretense. And that, more than any scripted scene or carefully rehearsed interview answer, showed the world exactly who Kate Winslet really was. Not the every woman, not the relatable star, not any of the labels that people tried to put on her. Just a person who knew her worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. Not even for 46 seconds. Not even on live television. Not even when walking away meant facing criticism and controversy. She walked away anyway. And in doing so, she walked towards something better. Something more authentic than any interview could ever be. She walked toward a version of herself that no longer had to smile through disrespect or laugh off insults or make herself smaller to fit into someone else's narrative. She simply walked away, and somehow, that was everything.